Consider the Great Pyramids, one of the original 7 wonders of the world and the only one that still exists today. Did you know that the pyramids of Giza weren't the only pyramids out there? And they weren't even the first ones. First, there were the pretty good pyramids, but they didn't catch on. Nah, I made that up. Back to the story. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that kings were chosen by gods to serve on earth as their mediators. In the afterlife, they were expected to become gods themselves. The pyramid complex was built to make sure that the king had everything they might need in the afterlife. The complex included the pyramid, a palace, and temples. The tomb in the pyramid, where the king was buried, was filled with many things they might need, like furniture, food, and gold vessels. Actually, the first pyramid had been built 80 years before the first pyramid of Giza appeared. Overall, there were around 100 of them. Some weren't finished though, since the construction took a while and not every pharaoh lived long enough to see the end of the construction. And now let's talk about the construction itself. The biggest of the pyramids of Giza is as tall as a 40-story building. So how on earth did they manage to build a structure that massive 5,000 years ago, long before machines and other equipment appeared? Well, let's figure it out. So Pharaoh Khufu ascended the throne around 2575 BCE, and his architects started the construction of the oldest and biggest of the pyramids of Giza. He figured that over 2 million limestone blocks had to be used to build the pyramid, each weighing around 2.5 tons, around the weight of a rhino. The architect wanted to finish the construction in 20 years. To make it possible, a stone had to be carried and pushed into place every 4 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, except leap year. So obviously, a lot of workers were needed to make it happen. Many believe that it was enslaved people who worked at the pyramid's construction site, but that's not true. Workers came from all over Egypt to contribute to the project. All in all, around 25,000 of them. The Egyptians were doing all kinds of work, starting with manual labor and crafting tools to administrative work. They all worked around 10 hours a day. They were housed and well fed, and they were overall living a more comfortable life than an average Egyptian could afford at that time. Supposedly, the builders lived in a nearby temporary city and were a highly organized community with a strong leader. The pyramids seemed to be designed to align with the points on a compass, and their sides symbolized the rays of the sun. But back at that time, there were no compasses. Ancient Egyptians figured out the directions themselves and with amazing precision. To align the pyramids, they used 2 constellations. The construction site was arranged on the west bank of the Nile River. This also had a symbolic meaning. Just like the sun sets in the west, life sets in the west as well. The second pyramid of Giza was for Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre. It's a bit smaller, but this one has the famous noseless statue of the Sphinx. Of course, originally it had a nose. I would tell you what happened to it, but it's still a mystery, and no one knows for sure. Sphinxes have the body of a lion and the head of a human. They were considered guardians of important areas. This famous sphinx, also pronounced sphinx, has the head of Pharaoh Khafre and is guarding his pyramid, facing the sunrise. The sphinx is one of the biggest and oldest statues in the world. Originally, it not only had a nose, but was also painted. Scientists have discovered traces of the red color of its face. So, most likely, the sphinx was painted red. There are also remains of yellow and blue color on its body. The statue definitely wasn't boring. Till around 1800, the Sphinx was buried up to its shoulders until an adventurer with a team of 160 men dug it out. But let's get back to the construction. The workers, of course, needed stone blocks. There were 2 main places where people could get these stones. One source was close to the construction site, but that fossil-lined yellow stone was only suitable for the pyramid's interior. The limestone blocks for the exterior were hauled from 8 miles away on 30-foot-long sleds. Apparently, it wasn't too hard to pull them. The sand mixed with the right amount of water was pretty slick, and 10 people could move a sled even with a rock weighing so much. Surprisingly, cutting off a block of limestone wasn't the biggest problem. When in the ground, it was soft and could be split relatively easy. But after getting exposed to the air, limestone hardens. So the most difficult part was to shape the blocks. That step was crucial because the smallest inaccuracies could lead to the whole pyramid collapsing. So, okay, those limestones were mined, carried on a sled, shaped, and then what? How could they be put into place? Well, this is still a mystery. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of a ramp system that dates back around the time the pyramids were being built. So historians have come to the consensus that, most likely, the Egyptians designed a unique ramp system to move and pull huge stone blocks. The most common opinion is that there were several ramps around the pyramid. There probably was a central ramp with 2 staircases on each side of it built over the pyramid stones. The ramp was growing as the pyramid was getting higher. People might have been walking up the stairs, pulling up stones on wooden sleds. But this is just one of the options. Other experts say that the ramps were around the pyramid, and some say that the ramps were inside the pyramid. Maybe we will never know for sure, and it'll forever remain a mystery. The exterior limestone of the pyramid was polished with sand and stone until it gleamed. On top, there was a gold and silver capstone, which glimmered over Egypt like a second sun. So that's how it was 5,000 years ago. Now, about the interior. Surprisingly, there's not much inside the pyramid. Most of it is just solid stone with very little open space. But let's take a quick look inside. From the entrance, there are 2 stairways, one going down and the other going up. They take us to the chambers. There are 3 of them inside. Now, why is that? Apparently, throughout the whole construction, a burial chamber had to be prepared at all times, just in case a pharaoh kicked the bucket before the construction ended. So, separate chambers were built one after another as the construction progressed. The last of them was the main one. It's called the King's Chamber. It's the one where Khufu was resting. It's the biggest room at the very heart of the pyramid, and there's a big passageway leading to it. It was likely used as a kind of elevator to move granite up to build the interior. Granite was also used to make 5 stories of support beams to ensure that the pyramid didn't collapse. And we can see that it worked since it's been standing for centuries. Unfortunately, none of these chambers have hieroglyphs on the walls. If you want to see the writings, you should go to the decorated tombs near the pyramids. Those pieces of art are depiction of ancient Egypt's culture and daily life. The texts allow researchers to study their language and grammar. The treasures that once were in the pyramids have been taken by people. There are also many secret tunnels and passages inside the pyramids, but even today, no one knows the whole plan of the interior. Scientists have been sending little robots with cameras inside for many years, but there's still a lot we don't know about the pyramids. Now they're trying to use an X-ray to scan the pyramids from the outside without going inside. So yeah, ancient Egyptians did create a mystery no one has been able to crack for 5,000 years already.
There are mysterious plasma bubbles floating around the pyramids of Giza. As bizarre as that might sound, let's get one thing clear right off the bat. There's nothing extraterrestrial going on here. Plasma bubbles are those weather anomalies that form in a layer of Earth's atmosphere called the ionosphere. This is an invisible layer surrounding our planet that stretches roughly from 50 to 400 miles above Earth's surface, right at the edge of space. In this layer, the sun, being the giant hot power that it is, basically cooks gases, splitting them into electrically charged particles called plasma. Here's where it gets interesting. At night, especially near the equator, these charged particles get disturbed, and when a bunch of them suddenly vanish at the same time, it forms what we call a plasma bubble. Imagine it like a big empty pocket where the plasma is missing or its quantity is lowered. But it's only considered a plasma bubble if this phenomenon occurs on a large scale, typically around 62 miles in size. If you're already packing your suitcase for Egypt and have put binoculars to look at the tips of the pyramids, I'm sorry to say that we can't see these plasma bubbles with the unaided eye. It's all happening way above our heads, completely invisible to us. Scientists need to use special equipment, like the Latitude Long-Range Ionosphere Radar, or LARID, to detect these bubbles. This advanced technology helps researchers track and observe the movement and formation of plasma bubbles in real time. This formation, by the way, can be triggered by solar storms. That brings us to November 2023, when an impressive solar storm occurred. On a scale from 1 to 5, this one was classified as a G3, which is considered a strong event. Solar storms occur when sunspots are basically cooler, darker areas on the sun's surface, release bursts of energy into space. These flares triggered several geomagnetic storms on Earth. While this might sound like doomsday stuff, it didn't disrupt our daily lives too much. In fact, it was great news for skywatchers, since the solar storm created stunning auroras, with the northern lights visible as far south as Greece and Turkey. But this particular storm in 2023 also had another interesting consequence. It caused the largest plasma bubble ever recorded by the Chinese radar. This phenomenon was so massive that it covered regions as far apart as the Egyptian pyramids and the Midway Islands in the Pacific Ocean. Now that's a huge distance, and it is a big deal for science. And that's because plasma bubbles are a growing threat to modern technology. Experts say they can disrupt satellite communications and GPS systems. So if you're using Google Maps or Waze and suddenly it can't figure out where you are, a plasma bubble might be to blame. Great. We now know what's going on with those bubbles, detected above the pyramids of Giza. But things get even weirder inside this ancient construction. Apparently, the Great Pyramid of Giza has the ability to concentrate electromagnetic energy within its interior. A couple of years ago, a group of researchers decided to see what would happen if they took this ancient architecture and hit it with radio waves. I mean, waves that are similar to the kind your phone uses, but on a much larger scale, up to 1,900 feet long. But since they couldn't just start blasting radio waves at the actual pyramid, they did the next best thing: computer modeling. Using these simulations, the researchers discovered something incredible. The Great Pyramid can actually concentrate electromagnetic energy within its internal chambers, as well as underneath its base, where an unfinished chamber is located. By concentrate, I mean something like trap it. For example, when you shout into a cave, you hear your voice echo back, right? The sound waves don't just disappear, they bounce around and get focused. Similarly, when radio waves hit the pyramid, they don't just pass through or around it. Instead, they get absorbed, bounce around, and focus inside and underneath the pyramid. Our list of mysterious phenomena surrounding the Egyptian pyramids doesn't end there. Inside the pyramid, there's a long, narrow passage that leads to what's known as the King's Chamber. This room sits at the center of the pyramid, and it's believed to have been the final resting place of Pharaoh Khufu, the ancient Egyptian leader who commissioned the entire thing over 4,000 years ago. When visitors step into the King's Chamber, two things normally strike them: the room's incredible acoustics and its heavy, imposing structure, which is entirely lined with red granite. Recently, scientists have started to connect these two facts. Some researchers now believe that the King's Chamber might be able to catch or pick up sound energy generated from other parts of the pyramid. In other words, this room might have been designed to amplify sound in a way that no other chamber in the pyramid can. To test this theory, researchers conducted an experiment where they sang in the Queen's Chamber, which is located directly below the King's Chamber. Here's where it gets wild. The music couldn't be heard in the lower underground rooms of the pyramid, but it sounded loud and clear in the King's Chamber. One possible explanation for this is the type of stone used in the King's Chamber: pink granite. Granite is known for its piezoelectric properties, meaning it can absorb energy from its surroundings, like sound vibrations, and convert it into electrical energy. This suggests that the chamber's unique acoustics might be due to more than just the shape of the room. It could be that the granite itself plays a role in amplifying and concentrating sound waves. According to scientists, these discoveries open up a whole new field of research into the pyramid's potential. Could the ancient pyramids have somehow harnessed the energy created by sound waves, or even Earth's natural vibrations? It might sound far-fetched, but considering the granite's piezoelectric properties are well documented in modern science, it's not entirely impossible. Who knows? Maybe we've only just scratched the surface of what the pyramids were truly capable of. Speaking of just scratching the surface, there's even more to think about, like how the pyramids ended up in such a perfect location. It seems the builders lined up the Great Pyramid with the cardinal points, meaning its sides are almost perfectly aligned with the four main directions: north, south, east, and west. There are many theories about how they did it, but one study suggests that Egyptians might have used the fall equinox to achieve this perfect alignment. During the equinox, the sun rises and sets directly in the east and west. It probably made it easier for builders to use the sun's position as a guide. By watching the sun during this time, they could make sure the pyramids were positioned just right. If we think about all these strange things about the pyramids, I mean their perfect alignment, the ability to concentrate radio waves, and the materials used in the chambers that might generate electrical energy, could the real purpose of the pyramids actually be much more complex than just being tombs? Well, Nikola Tesla thought so. It is said that the famous inventor and engineer was kind of obsessed with the Egyptian pyramids, and he wondered if they might actually be giant energy transmitters. He believed the shape and position of the pyramids could help them function as huge generators, capable of producing free, limitless energy. Some researchers agree with Tesla and believe that these massive monuments might have been designed as giant power plants. According to their theory, builders could have figured out how to move ions, those electrically charged particles in the atmosphere, by placing materials like copper, gold, and silver around the pyramids. So, it's definitely possible that the ancient Egyptians created a sustainable, renewable power source. Although this is a very interesting thought, we haven't been able to confirm this theory, and the true purpose of the pyramids remain one of humanity's biggest mysteries.
Secant, cosine, tangent, sine, 3.14159. Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think? But wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there. As a man walks past you with a bucket of paint, he's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid. And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a great pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on. And that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Trans-America Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas. Something strange is lurking beneath the sands of Giza, and scientists have no idea what it is. Archaeologists just found a hidden structure near the Great Pyramid using advanced ground scanning technology. What's inside? Nobody knows, but excavations are already underway. The Great Pyramid of Giza is one of the most famous monuments on Earth, but it doesn't stand alone. It's surrounded by an ancient necropolis, a massive royal graveyard filled with tombs and monuments. They belong to pharaohs, nobles, and other high-ranking officials. Most of these tombs are above the ground. They're called mastabas, rectangular, flat-roofed tombs built from limestone or mud brick, and they've been studied for decades. But from old movies, we know that these weren't simple graves. They have deep vertical shafts leading to underground burial chambers, where the past was sealed away for eternity. And recently, archaeologists found one curious empty space in the cemetery, a completely unexplored patch of ground. No mastabas, no visible ruins, nada. For years they ignored it, but between 2021 and 2023, they decided to investigate. They didn't dig though. Instead, they used a technology that kinda acts like X-rays for the ground. These radars let scientists see the secrets hidden there. And there was something hidden beneath the sand, something deliberately buried and forgotten. A 2-part underground structure. One part was shallow and L-shaped. It's about 33 feet long and buried just 6.5 feet deep. But below that, a deeper, more mysterious anomaly, a structure completely different from anything else in the area. They called it a highly resistive anomaly, which means it's dense and solid, likely made of stone, sand, or even metal. And still, no one has a clue what's inside it. Now, it's clear that humans made the L shape. It wasn't formed by nature. And the shallower structure might have been an entrance to whatever is hidden below. But they only have some theories about what might be hidden there. It's also filled with sand and gravel. It was probably deliberately backfilled after its construction, perhaps to preserve this. Why? Well, we don't know yet. The archaeological team will need to excavate to understand what exactly this thing was and why it was built. The first guess is a lost burial chamber. Many tombs in Giza have underground burial sites, but most have clear surface markers. This one, for some reason, has nothing, but it could be one of them. The second guess is an ancient offering chapel. Egyptologists know that some chapels were built in this shape, but usually they were above ground, not buried like this. And finally, it might be something we've never seen before. If this turns out to be a new type of structure, it could rewrite what we know about the burials of pharaohs. The only way to know for sure is to dig it up. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Excavations are already underway. Archaeologists are racing against time to uncover the truth. But there's a real danger there too. Giza's fragile ancient structures need to be handled carefully. Otherwise, they could be damaged beyond repair. So all we can do is wait for the truth. Now, these tombs always held fascinating mysteries. Unfortunately, we'll never learn tons of these mysteries because of some relentless tomb robbers. Egyptian tombs were built to guard the bodies for eternity. But that absolutely didn't stop people from breaking in and stealing everything valuable inside. They've been bothering these ancient sites for thousands of years, starting way back in Pharaoh's times. Many of the most famous tombs, including those in Giza, Saqqara, and the Valley of the Kings, were looted. It was a common practice in ancient Egypt. And they were serious about this whole thing. They dug secret tunnels to bypass traps and walls, bribed or threatened tomb workers to get inside knowledge, cracked open sarcophagi to grab gold, jewelry, and artifacts. And by the time modern archaeologists got to most of these tombs, they had already been picked clean. The reigning pharaohs got tired of this infuriating nonsense. The Valley of the Kings, the famous burial ground of Egyptian royalty, was supposed to be the ultimate safe zone. Tombs were built deep underground, hidden in the desert. Passages were sealed with giant stone blocks. False doors and traps were added to confuse thieves. Even curses were written on the walls, warnings of horrible endings for anyone who dared to disturb the tomb, which is exactly where we got all those horror stories about mummies from. Spoiler alert, none of it worked. Most tombs in the Valley of the Kings were fully robbed within 100 years of being sealed. Even King Tutankhamun's tomb, one of the most famous in history, was broken into twice in ancient times. Some of them decided to try and fight back. The New Kingdom rulers built hidden unmarked tombs in a way that should have prevented the looters from finding them, but didn't work. Some pharaohs, like Ramses II, were moved in secret to prevent their bodies from being stolen. Nope, didn't matter. The grave robbers always won. That's because tomb raiders weren't just random thieves. They were skilled, organized, and well-connected. They knew exactly where to look. Many were the ones who had built these sites in the first place, and they knew where the entrances were. If they couldn't smash through the doors, they'd dig through the walls, floors, and even ceilings to break inside. They also worked fast, often within a few years after the tombs were sealed, before anyone forgot where the valuable stuff was. The Khufu's pyramid, the one that's next to this newly discovered structure, was looted long before modern times. The one thing left inside when explorers got there? An empty granite box where the sarcophagus used to be. Unfortunately, it's not just about gold. History itself gets stolen during these raids. Ancient Egyptians wrote detailed records of what exactly and where they buried. So when archaeologists compare these lists to what's found, they can see what's missing, which is often everything valuable. Most artifacts don't end up in museums. They just disappear into private collections, where they can never be studied again. Which is, of course, completely unfair. In fact, a few countries have had enough and started passing laws to take historical artifacts back from private collectors. In Italy, if you own an ancient Roman artifact, you must prove you got it legally. China is actively hunting down stolen artifacts, and they must find ways to retrieve it back from the Western collectors. In Egypt, they passed new laws making it illegal for private citizens to own any ancient Egyptian artifacts at all. Other countries, like the US, the UK, Germany, or Switzerland, are completely fine with rich guys owning their history. The British Museum is built on looted things. European empires invaded half the planet and took whatever they wanted back home. Their museums are often full of such stolen artifacts, and unfortunately, they refuse to give most of them back. For example, the Rosetta Stone. It was taken from Egypt by Napoleon's army, then stolen again by the British after they beat the French. Egypt has been demanding to return for years, but they still can't get it back. Or the Parthenon marbles. These magnificent massive Greek structures were taken from the Parthenon in Athens by a British lord in the 19th century. Greece has been begging for them back ever since, but the UK doesn't feel like it. Not to mention tons of Mesoamerican artifacts scattered in various museums across the world. European explorers raided Mayan and Aztec temples, took statues, jewelry, and sacred objects, and now Mexico is fighting to get them back. Well, wouldn't it be surprising even if this mysterious underground chamber has somehow been looted already? But if it's a newly found place, could it be one of the few that escaped the hands of grave robbers? Could there still be ancient artifacts, untouched for 4,500 years? We can only hope that those guys didn't get there first. Wow! Scientists have found a lost city beneath Egypt's pyramids. And it's incredibly large, bigger than the biggest target you can imagine. Underground chambers, passageways, and vertical structures. Scientists have no idea what purposes they serve. But let's start from the very beginning. Italian and Scottish scientists studying the Pyramid of Khafra discovered something that looked like secret tunnels under 3 pyramids. This find might change what we know about ancient Egypt. The expedition, called the Khafra Project, was led by Corrado Malunga from Pisa, Italy, and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde, Scotland. Their mission was to focus on exploring Khafra's pyramid, the second largest on the Giza Plateau. Scientists uncovered a massive structure beneath the Pyramid of Khafra. Could it be an ancient Egyptian underground city? The experts analyzed the data they had and came to the conclusion that 8 large vertical structures could be hiding beneath, possibly wells or shafts. They extend a staggering 6,500 feet across. Imagine placing 2.5 Burj Khalifas on the ground, one after another, and you get the sheer size of this find. These shafts also plunge nearly 2,000 feet underground. Some of the deepest underground stations in the world are located at a mere 380 feet underground or so. These cylindrical shafts are surrounded by spiral paths. Picture some old Gothic castle. They're connected to 2 giant, weirdly shaped chambers. Are those cubes? Or possibly bowls? Each of these chambers is likely more than 260 feet across. Now, even though we know about the structures now, no one has figured out their original purpose yet. Want to hear something even more shocking? Okay then. The team is almost sure that similar access points can be found under all 3 pyramids. In other words, all of them might be linked by a hidden system of underground tunnels, chambers, and passages. Even deeper, about 4,000 feet under the surface, there might be more unknown structures. And doesn't it add to the mystery? But the coolest news is that, according to some team members, these hidden structures near Giza pyramids could align with the legendary Halls of Amenti. In ancient Egyptian mythology, it's a place where people are believed to arrive when they're close to the end of their days. There, they are said to take a 3-day-long trial, facing their biggest fears. Now, how did scientists even discover these hidden spaces? To uncover them, researchers used 2 satellites positioned 420 miles above Earth. They sent radar signals to the Giza Plateau, and these signals generated detailed images, which were later compiled into a 3D model of the underground layout, including the newly detected shafts. Then, using synthetic aperture radar or SAR technology, which is a type of radar that can penetrate through stone, the team also spotted 5 small room-like structures hidden deep within the pyramid. One of these chambers contained a sarcophagus, which was once thought to be the tomb of Pharaoh Khafra. But now, scientists believe this was a mistake. The true burial site is likely to be elsewhere. In any case, these 5 hidden rooms were completely unknown before the scans. They seem to be arranged in the center of the pyramid and are linked to underground pathways leading somewhere below the structure. There's an opinion that these tunnels could lead to more hidden chambers and wells. Some of them might be around 4,500 years old. Wow, what if they help us solve ancient civilization mysteries? Preliminary data suggests that all this underground space can be much more than a few empty chambers. There might be many more hidden structures near the Giza pyramids. How come? Well, the thing is, the structure appears to include hollowed-out sections with spiral pathways leading even deeper underground. Refining the images hinting at this could reveal an extensive subterranean network. It might be a whole city hidden under the surface. Now, despite the excitement surrounding these findings, there are also a lot of people who don't believe in the existence of the underground city. They're skeptical about the archaeological discovery in Egypt due to the lack of peer-reviewed verification. That's why several archaeologists and radar experts have challenged the validity of the claims. They've explained that the technology used to make the discovery may not be advanced enough to produce such detailed underground imagery. According to them, the 5 smaller chambers found near the surface could be natural formations, since the area had had sacred significance long before the construction of the pyramids. Some experts have even dismissed the use of radar methods in this context altogether. They call these methods scientifically unproven and question their accuracy. The discovery has also reignited discussions about ancient Egyptian myths and the possibility of hidden texts lying somewhere beneath the Giza pyramids. The layout of the newly detected underground chambers shares similarities with mythological accounts of the Hall of Records, a rumored chamber that could preserve early Egyptian wisdom. If confirmed, these findings could significantly reshape the understanding of Egypt's sacred topography. Plus, this lost city beneath Egypt's pyramid could become physical evidence of previously unknown underground structures. That's why the Khafra project is super eager to begin excavating to confirm their findings. But getting approval from Egyptian authorities is a challenging process. The discoveries still need to undergo peer review before they are accepted by the academic community. By the way, this recent archaeological discovery in Egypt comes on the heels of another discovery involving a weird structure beneath the Royal Giza Cemetery, which researchers believe is unnatural in origin. Archaeologists used remote sensing techniques and uncovered a mysterious L-shaped structure underground in the Western Cemetery of Giza. This area is known to house burials of royal family members and high-ranking officials. Many of the tombs in the cemetery have above-ground mastabas, rectangular stone or mud brick structures with flat roofs. But there is an area in the center of the cemetery where there are no above-ground structures. To investigate this unexplored region, the team used electrical resistive tomography and ground-penetrating radar. ERT works by sending electrical currents into the ground and measuring the resistance to detect remains. As for GPR, it sends radar into the ground and maps the structures based on the radar's return. The team found an anomaly about 6.5 feet beneath the surface. It appeared to be an L-shaped structure measuring at least 33 feet in length. The readings suggested that the structure had been backfilled with sand after its construction. This made the team hypothesize that it could be a mix of sand and gravel, or possibly an air void. This anomaly was classified as a highly resistive structure, which meant it didn't occur naturally. Motoyuki Sato, the study's lead author and professor at Tohoku University in Japan, claims that the structure is not a natural formation due to its sharp shape. Another weird thing about ancient Egyptian pyramids is that historians have long believed that they were built primarily for royals and high-status individuals who had the wealth and power to create such massive structures. However, new research from the archaeological site of Tombos in modern-day Sudan challenges this assumption. The thing is, Tombos' pyramid may have served as burial sites for low-status workers as well as elites. The hard-working members of ancient communities may have found their last resting place in some of the most visible monuments, including the pyramids. Located along the Nile River in the ancient region of Nubia, Tombos became part of Egypt after its conquest of the area around 1400 BCE. That's when Egypt established the site to strengthen its colonial control. Workers at Tombos built pyramids, but those were much more modest than the famous pyramids of Giza. The research team reanalyzed 110 human skeletons from Tombos, originally studied in 2012. In particular, they examined the entheses, the areas where tendons and ligaments attach to bones. Such an analysis can give us insights into the amount of physical labor a person performed. When someone does hard labor, their bones often develop distinct crests and ridges at these attachment points due to the stress on the tendons and ligaments. And while some skeletons showed little change in their entheses, suggesting they belong to individuals from the upper classes, others showed more serious changes. It means they belong to lower-class workers. This finding can totally challenge our earlier understanding of pyramid burials, especially the idea that only elites were buried in the pyramids, because the pyramids themselves were designed for the elite. This recent research may prove that lower-class workers may have found their final resting place in these monumental structures too.
Listen to this. Neanderthal fiber technology. Nope, I'm not joking. The concept is real. In 2020, a team of scientists published a paper that redefined the way we saw our closest ancestors. A find in France changed archaeology forever, and it wasn't the first time something like this had happened. But let me start from the beginning. Neanderthals. For a long time, they fit the image of the typical cavemen. If you are now thinking of someone like Fred Flintstone, you wouldn't be much wrong. What was the reason behind this stereotype? When did we start believing that Neanderthals were not the brightest tools in the shed of evolution? In comes William King, a 19th century British geologist. He was the man who named the Neanderthals. Based on the bones King found, the scientist declared the species not intelligent, and this image stuck with the Neanderthals for centuries to come. But a piece of string, just a quarter of an inch long, changed everything. A small, dry river valley, Abri du Maras, was the place of the great find. Archaeologists unearthed a cord fragment next to a stone tool. Such twisted fibers could have been used for everything from making clothes to fishing nets. In prehistory, this was some advanced tech, and the Neanderthals seemed to have mastered it. Scientists already knew that these early humans made tar from birch bark, and that they produced shell beads. There's even evidence of Neanderthal art. They were definitely not primitive. The string section and similar finds are changing the way we perceive our ancestors. The world of archaeology is constantly changing. Take the pyramids in Egypt, for example. Turns out, they weren't really built by an army of people who the pharaoh made work until they passed out. Herodotus, the famous Greek historian, was the man who started the confusion. He claimed, in 500 BCE, that 100,000 men took part in the construction of the Great Pyramid in Giza. He made no mention of who they were and why they were building the pyramids. That's how the myth started. Huge stone slabs pulled by humans, driven by a foreman with a whip. But Egyptologists would beg to differ. Those are the scientists who study ancient Egypt's culture. Fairly recently, they uncovered a workers' village that told a different tale. Yes, there was evidence of hard work on the workers' bones, but the construction industry is demanding even today. It took almost 6 years for 12,000 workers to complete the world's tallest building, Burj Khalifa. Back in Egypt, 3 times more workers finished the Great Pyramid in around 2 decades. An impressive feat of ancient engineering, wouldn't you agree? Superiors looked well after the Egyptians who built the pyramids. Their diet was rich in protein. They had medical care and they got paid properly. In fact, they lived better than the non-working population. And they lived with their families near the construction site. Archaeologists know all this because they unearthed bakeries and dormitories with bread jars and other goodies. Looks like the pharaohs were okay employers after all, and the job market wasn't that terrible. They also kept detailed papyrus records of the build and hieroglyphs. You and I wouldn't stand a chance of reading these letters that resemble images. Egyptologists had the same problem. For over a millennium, no one had used this type of font. And it's not like there was an English ancient Egyptian dictionary you could open and find meanings of words. But all this changed in 1822. A couple of decades before, the French found a broken slab of black granite. The stone contained one text in 3 scripts: Ancient Greek, Egyptian hieroglyphs, and Demotic. The last one was also the Egyptian language, but in a simplified script. Scientists dated it back to 196 BCE. The content is a religious proclamation. A French philologist and Orientalist, Jean-François Champollion, was the first one to crack the code. You see, people haven't forgotten ancient Greek letters. The Frenchman successfully matched the Greek letters with the ones in the Egyptian script. And voila, we were finally able to read hieroglyphs. The name of the piece of granite that made it all possible was the Rosetta Stone. The importance of its discovery went beyond archaeology. The word Rosetta Stone even entered the English dictionary. It represents a discovery that helps people understand an enigma that has been puzzling them for a long time. There are similar games. A symbol is attached to a particular message. Then you have to decode the message by replacing the symbol with a corresponding letter. In a nutshell, this is what scientists did with the Rosetta Stone more than 2 centuries ago. Do you know what is the oldest deciphered language in Europe? It has an unattractive name, Linear B. The script belongs to the Mycenaean Greek language. It predates the ancient Greek alphabet by several centuries. You can easily guess which script it is descended from. Linear A. The people from Crete used Linear B more than 1,000 years ago. During the Late Bronze Age, the Greek civilization that used the script vanished. There was no one who could read Linear B, and more importantly, no one knew it existed in the first place. This was about to change during the first years of the 20th century. A British archaeologist by the name of Sir Arthur Evans excavated a vast palace complex at Knossos, Crete, Greece. This was the center of the Minoan culture that created the enigmatic script. The palace boasted some 1,300 rooms. They had colorful paintings of dolphins, griffins, and bulls. All of these captivated the archaeologist's imagination. But their biggest find was at first overlooked. Thousands of slabs of baked clay. The fire that brought down the palace helped preserve the tablets. It was impossible to read the slabs, though. They were written in an unknown language. The scientific community had to wait for another half a century before Michael Ventris cracked the code. He was an English architect and cryptographer. Ventris studied Greek and Latin. While attending the famous archaeologist's lecture, the young man decided to solve the puzzle of Linear B once and for all. He managed to do so in 1952. One of Ventris's most amazing discoveries was that the script was an archaic form of Greek. But cryptology still hasn't solved the code of Linear A. This writing system will remain a mystery until a motivated young person like Michael Ventris comes along. They wouldn't have to be a professional archaeologist. Basil Brown certainly wasn't. Yet in 1939 he discovered the richest early medieval tomb in Europe. This happened in Sutton Hoo in the southeast of England. This wasn't an ordinary tomb made out of stone. It was a full-size ship, 3 times as long as a London double-decker bus. And that's not all. Apart from its main purpose, the ship was full of riches. Deluxe hanging bowls, feasting vessels, gold and dress accessories, and luxurious textiles were just some of the treasures found. Archaeologists were also amazed by the silverware from distant Byzantium. You probably know this city as Istanbul, Turkey. Even in our age, it's several days' drive from Sutton Hoo. Just imagine how much time and money it cost to import a silver plate in the 7th century. That's when the ship went down, according to archaeologists. The English couldn't have done it. At that time, there was no England. The people living in the British Isles at the time were the Anglo-Saxons. Perhaps the ship from the grassy mounds in Suffolk belonged to one of their kings? We will never know. The local acidic soil did away with any possible evidence, or no one laid there in the first place. It could have been a cenotaph, which is a monument constructed to honor an important person. The archaeologists still don't have a definite answer. But what they have found at Sutton Hoo shed light on the Dark Ages. Before the discovery of the ship, they knew little about what had been going on in Britain after the Romans left. Now, the image of the early Anglo-Saxon society was much clearer. Perhaps the English soil will be the site of the next great breakthrough in archaeology.
Before we get into the reason why and how there are pyramids all around the world, let's talk about some of the examples. I'll start with the Pyramid of the Sun in Mexico. These folks really knew how to build a city. Their well-planned urban center spanned over 7 square miles and boasted several pyramids. But the Pyramid of the Sun is the most impressive. This giant pyramid was built way back in 100 CE and is one of the biggest structures of its kind in the whole Western Hemisphere. It's so big that it's 216 feet high above the ground. If you ever find yourself in this ancient city, you won't be able to miss the Pyramid of the Sun. It's right there on the east side of the Avenue of the Dead, the city's main north-south street. To build this incredible pyramid, around 1 million cubic yards of material were used, including a special kind of red volcanic rock called hued tezontle. Impressive, huh? We don't know too much about the people who built the Pyramid of the Sun or its purpose. But archaeologists believe there was once a temple on top of it. When explorers went below the pyramid in the 1970s, they found a bunch of cool tunnels and chambers. In 2011, they even found a secret stash of clay pots, obsidian pieces, animal bones, human figurines, and a mask. Who knows what other secrets the pyramid is hiding? If you decide to see this one, you must climb the pyramid using the 248 uneven steps on the west side. Watch your step. Sudan got some pyramids too. Nubian pyramids aren't as big as the ones in Egypt, but they still got around 200 of them. These ancient pyramids have been home to the tombs of the pharaohs of the Meroitic Kingdom for almost 1,000 years, who ruled Egypt from Nubia to the Mediterranean Sea. The pyramids at Meroe were constructed using granite and reddish sandstone. Oh, and did you know that Sudan has more ancient pyramids than Egypt? The Kushite pyramids depict the indigenous architecture and burial traditions of Nubia's Napata and Meroe kingdoms, which ancient Egypt influenced. Meroe, the burial site of over 40 queens and kings, is the most extensive Nubian pyramid site. The tomb walls depict mummified royals bedecked in jewelry, their wooden caskets containing bows, quivers of arrows, and other artifacts pointing to the Meroitic relationship and trade with Egyptian and Greek civilizations. So if you're looking for some ancient tombs to explore, you may consider skipping the crowds in Egypt and heading on down to Sudan. Let's fly to Iraq to see some more pyramids. Ziggurats have fancy receding layers and tiered temples. Instead of a smooth exterior, it has tiers like a cake. Perfect for all the important work and rituals that went on inside. You can find these towering structures scattered throughout Iraq and Iran, and they're a real testament to the power and skills of the people who built them. One of the biggest and most impressive ziggurats is the ziggurat at Ur. It's basically a giant rectangular pyramid that stands a whopping 70 to 100 feet tall, with 3 levels of terraces and a temple on top. Can you imagine how many baked bricks it took to build that thing? Try 720,000 for just the lower portion. This particular ziggurat was built for Sumerian king Ur-Nammu. Similar to other ones, this pyramid has been around for thousands of years, so it got a little rough around the edges. Thankfully, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II and some archaeologists came to the rescue in the 6th and 20th centuries respectively. And now, you can find this near Talil Air Base. The ziggurat at Ur was built in 2100 BCE by King Ur-Nammu for the moon deity Nana. It was the tallest building in the city, and you could see it from miles around. It was like the medieval cathedral spire of its day. People would come here to bring their agricultural surplus and get their food allotments and seek spiritual nourishment. Sadly, the Nana temple at the top of the ziggurat didn't survive, but we do have some blue glazed bricks that may have been part of its decoration. The lower parts of the ziggurat are pretty amazing though. The architects even included holes in the temple's baked exterior to let the water evaporate from its core. Since we explored some of the pyramids on our planet, let's take a broader perspective. They can be found in many parts of the world. Egypt has over 100 pyramids, double that number in Sudan, and dozens of others are scattered in the Middle East and China. The Americas have the most pyramids in total, with more pyramids than the rest of the world combined. These pyramids are located in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. Time to know more about the evolution of pyramids through history. The oldest pyramid is in Egypt. This pyramid was a step pyramid, which was created by placing one layer of stone on top of another. The pharaoh Sneferu is credited with creating the pyramid shape we recognize today. During his 45-year reign, he built 3 pyramids. His first 2 attempts failed, but he finally got it right with the Red Pyramid, which is considered the first true pyramid. It was Sneferu's son, Khufu, who built the Great Pyramid of Giza, which was the tallest human-made structure on Earth for almost 4,000 years. Latin American pyramids are similar to early Egyptian step pyramids, but they were built independently with no knowledge of each other. The pyramids in Sudan were built around 700 BCE and are tall but much narrower than those in Egypt. How in the world did all these civilizations build these things without even texting each other? After all, the Aztecs, Mayans, and ancient Egyptians were about as different as possible. But despite their cultural differences, they all seem to agree on one thing. Pyramids were pretty cool. Step pyramids are all around the world because they were the most feasible and stable way to build large and tall structures without access to lighter building materials like wood and metal. The triangular form with a square base is the best way to build a sturdy structure, and having a cube structure would require more material for less height. Now, when it comes to pyramid design, the Egyptian pyramids were like giant triangles with a square base, smooth sides, and a pointy top. On the other hand, the Aztecs and Mayans went for a tiered cake look, with steps leading up to a flat platform on top. So, while all these pyramids share the same basic shape, they have their own unique flair. Each group built its pyramids using different materials, techniques, and slope angles. So while they may have been inspired by each other's work occasionally, they were just doing their own thing. Egyptian pyramids had smooth, angled sides that were designed to help the pharaoh's soul ascend to heaven. The Pyramid of the Sun was built over a series of caves that served as a passageway for the deities. The Maya built the temple of Kukulkan in Chichen Itza to honor the deity Kukulkan, usually represented by a serpent. Nicknamed El Castillo, it has 91 steps on each side, plus a platform. That's 365 steps, one for each day of the Mayan calendar. Tell me, Brightsiders, how were pyramids built? To begin with, humans made them, not a foreign race from space that landed on Earth. You see, one thing that all pyramids have in common is that they were built without advanced tools or even the wheel. It took a lot of people to build them, including skilled laborers and architects. For example, it's estimated that 20,000 people built the Great Pyramid of Giza, and it's believed that most of them were skilled laborers. Building pyramids was a massive undertaking that required years of planning and effort. The Great Pyramid at Cholula, Mexico, took 600 years to complete.
If there's a question that still baffles archaeologists to this day, it's this one. How did the ancient Egyptians build those magnificent pyramids? As far as we know today, their resources were quite limited, especially in terms of tools and building materials. We still don't have a fully satisfying answer, but hey, we've got some pretty amazing theories worth considering. The leading contender among these theories involves the clever Egyptians employing a sneaky strategy. Now picture this. They constructed a slanted and curving mound made of bricks, earth, and sand encircling the pyramid to be. As the pyramid grew taller and taller, they simply increased the height and length of this wacky structure. It's like they were playing an ancient game of Jenga. Now, how did they get those massive stone blocks up there? Well, according to the legendary ancient Greek historian Herodotus, they used sleds, rollers, and levers. It sounds like they turned construction into a supersized game of tug-of-war. And guess what? Herodotus also claimed that the Great Pyramid, the one from Giza, the granddaddy of them all, took a whopping 20 years to build. There's more. Herodotus also dropped a mind-boggling number on us. 100,000 men were supposedly involved in this pyramid extravaganza. Did they hire the entire Egyptian population? Well, it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. These men were probably mostly farmers, so they probably focused on the pyramids when there wasn't much work to be done in the fields. Like during the flood season of the Nile River. Obviously, specialists in the archaeological community had something to add to this theory. By the late 20th century, they discovered some evidence that suggests the workforce might have been smaller and more permanent than previously thought. Instead of a massive army of 100,000 pyramid builders, they proposed that a modest crew of around 20,000 workers, accompanied by support personnel like bakers, physicians, and even spiritual leaders, could have gotten the job done. There was also this theory that claimed that the pyramids were actually built from the top downward. It suggested that these colossal structures were nothing more than isolated hills used as quarries. The stones were supposedly drawn from these hills, and over time, competing engineers took charge and transformed them into the iconic pyramids we know today. Now, before you dismiss this theory as a wild fantasy, some folks thought it wasn't completely crazy. After all, there are instances where isolated hills exist, so maybe this theory had a tiny glimmer of truth. Whether it involved ramp building or ingenious work schedules, one thing is clear. Those pyramids have definitely left their mark on history and on our imaginations. Now, speaking of ancient Egyptian mysteries, there's this gigantic unfinished obelisk sitting in ancient Egypt, and scientists are trying to figure out how it was shaped. Now, some people suggest that our industrious ancestors used handheld pounders to get the job done. One expert has a different take on the matter, though. He argues that if we take a closer look at the pattern left behind by the shaping tool, we'll notice something peculiar. The walls of the trenches surrounding the obelisk display a neat and even pattern, which is pretty unlikely if they were pounded away by mere mortal hands. According to this expert, those horizontal striations are usually the result of a tool that takes breaks while removing material, leaving its mark on the surface. But wait, there's more. Imagine the tool being rocked back and forth against the trench walls, clearing away the waste to keep the trench from narrowing. Well, in that case, the tool might have left some funky horizontal striations where it was pressed against the sidewall. This sounds like some fancy technology at play, don't you think? And guess what? The dynastic Egyptians probably didn't have access to that kind of know-how. Another famous Egyptologist from way back also uncovered a bunch of core drills during his adventures. Although the actual drill bits are missing, his collection houses these particular core remnants made of limestone, alabaster, and even granite. These constructions aren't the only amazing thing the ancient Egyptians left behind, though. As it turns out, the Egyptians were the genius minds behind the creation of the handheld mirror. Yeah, that little mirror you use every day to check yourself out. But here's the twist. These mirrors are like pieces of art. They were decorated with inscriptions and figures. But that's not all. The Egyptians had a serious concern with their appearance. They knew the importance of personal hygiene and looking fabulous. So, in their quest for pearly whites, they invented toothbrushes and toothpaste. Dental problems were pretty common back then, and their smiles weren't exactly all white. Dentistry wasn't their strongest suit, you see. Maybe their minds were distracted by all that pyramid building. So that doesn't mean those ancient toothpaste recipes weren't amazing. One delightful concoction included rock salt, mint, dried iris petals, and pepper. Some brave dentists in the 21st century tried it out, and it worked pretty well. Ground-up ash was also used in another recipe to create a tooth cleansing paste. Mint was missing, so that didn't do much for their breath. That's when the genius Egyptians came up with the world's first breath mints. They made tablets from heated spices like cinnamon, and they mixed it with honey. Now, let's shift gears to home decor, Egyptian style. They surely took ornamentation to the next level. While the concept of decorating furniture started in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians cranked it up a notch. They went all out with different colors of ink and even developed various weights of paper. Oh, and let's not forget about those cute little area rugs we all have in our homes today. Guess who came up with the idea? Yep, the Egyptians. They used the versatile papyrus plant to make those cozy rugs. And speaking of trends, the Egyptians loved their knickknacks. They had an assortment of small figurines in the shapes of cats, dogs, and people. These statues were made from various materials, like simple sun-dried mud to the ultimate bling of gold. It all depended on how loaded you were. The Egyptians were also all about farming, and they knew that clean water was crucial for their crops and animals. That's why they came up with some nifty inventions and techniques to make sure their land was fertile and their plants were happy. First off, they had the genius idea of using ox-drawn plows. They had two types of plows, heavy and light. The heavy plow would strut its stuff, cutting deep furrows in the soil, while the lighter plow followed behind, fluffing up the earth. But they didn't stop there. After plowing, the Egyptians would break up clumps of soil and sow the rows with seeds. To give those seeds a good old squish into the furrows, they'd march their livestock across the field, effectively closing up the furrows. But hey, all that hard work would be pointless if their seeds were as dry as the Sahara. That's where irrigation comes into play. The Egyptians were so good at it that other cultures, like the Greeks and Romans, couldn't help but copy their techniques. Now let's switch gears and talk about the marvelous architecture of ancient Egypt. These folks weren't just skilled farmers, they were also architectural maestros. They built these fancy canals to carry water to farms and villages, and boy, did they know how to make those canals look pretty. Just imagine strolling along a canal lined with ornate structures. The pharaoh Ramesses the Great was quite the overachiever when it came to construction. One of his mind-blowing creations was the construction located at Abu Simbel. This building was designed so that twice a year, the sun would shine directly into it and illuminate the statues of Ramesses. And let's not forget about the corbelled arch. Without this architectural gem, we'd be missing out on some mind-boggling structures like the Great Pyramid. The Egyptians knew how to make things stand tall and proud, thanks to their engineering and construction wizardry. They built grand halls and inner sanctums that make your jaw drop. And some of these temples doubled as astronomical observatories.
This is not a dune set. This is a very real desert in Niger. Jado was probably built by the nomadic Sao people and is filled with ksars, which are fortified houses made of salt and clay, with giant walls and secret passages. Located deep in the desert, it was once a vital stop for trans-Saharan caravans, but is now a hotspot for smugglers and bandits. The site has been off-limits since 2002 due to its dangers. The origin of the ksars remain a mystery. No archaeological studies have been conducted, leaving many questions unanswered. Even today, shifting sands reveal and conceal parts of these ancient ruins, fueling local speculation about what might still be hidden beneath the desert. Speaking of connective tunnels, scientists were blown away by the discovery of lava tubes in Saudi Arabia. These underground passages form when molten lava cools down. Researchers believe that ancient nomadic groups may have utilized these tunnels to survive the super harsh desert climates. While excavating the tunnels, archaeologists uncovered artifacts, rock art, and skeletal remains. The art and animal bones show that the people who used the tunnels were probably sheep and goat herders. They're still piecing together whether these groups lived in the tunnels for extended periods or just used them as temporary shelters. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for thousands of years, but it's still hiding secrets. Using special scanning technology, scientists found two hidden structures under an ancient burial ground. The first is a shallow L-shaped structure, and below it is a much larger space that could be a final resting place or a chamber. The smaller structure was filled with sand on purpose, while the deeper one might be an empty chamber. Experts believe the two are connected, possibly as an entrance leading to a secret chamber. This is big news because it might give us some more insight into who built the pyramids and why. The world is full of ancient writing, but some messages refuse to give up their secrets, like the mystery of the baffled tablet. This unusual stone, pulled from a lake in Georgia, is covered in symbols no one can read. Even with modern technology, experts are completely stumped. The tablet is about the size of a book, with 60 symbols carefully carved into its surface, but 39 of them don't match any known language. Some resemble scripts from ancient civilizations in the Middle East, India, and Egypt, but none are an exact match. To make things even trickier, part of the tablet is broken off, meaning a piece of the puzzle is missing forever. To rule out a hoax, scientists studied the tablet closely. They confirmed it's made of vesicular basalt, an extremely tough local rock. Whoever carved these symbols must have been really skilled. Based on similar archaeological finds, experts believe the tablet could date back thousands of years, possibly to the late Bronze or early Iron Age. Some symbols repeat, which could mean they're numbers. Maybe it's an inventory list, a record of battles, or even an offering to the deities. Until someone cracks the code, the baffled tablet remains an unsolved mystery from the depths of history. Experts are still stumped with what this Minoan disc might mean. The Phaistos disc is one of the most mysterious finds from the Minoan civilization. This 6-inch clay object, discovered in 1908, has strange spiral markings that no one has fully decoded yet. The disc has 241 symbols on both sides, showing everything from people and animals to tools and plants. Experts have come up with many theories about what the symbols mean. Some think it's an early form of Greek. Others suggest it's a prayer or a hymn. And some even believe it could be a letter from a king in Anatolia to a Greek ruler. Let's see who will be the first to figure this out. It's always a fun day at an archaeologist's office when they find something as big as a 2,000-year-old marble head. A French archaeologist mission went digging inside an old medieval house near Alexandria in Egypt and found a statue's head depicting an old, possibly ill man. This statue dates from the last Egyptian dynasty before it became part of the Roman Empire, and the site where it was found is associated with the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. For archaeologists, even the smallest finds at this site means a lot. You've heard of Lucy, right? The Australopithecus that was an early ancestor for us humans. Well, scientists found some of her species' footprints somewhere in Tanzania. The so-called Laetoli footprints are over 3 million years old. The trail stretched 88 feet and has about 70 footprints, left behind when a bunch of early humans walked across some wet volcanic ash. What's cool is that these early humans were already walking on 2 feet, like us, not all hunched over like apes. The close spacing of the prints shows they probably had short legs and a shorter stride than we do today. In an ancient Egyptian temple, archaeologists uncovered a shrine unlike any other, a place dedicated to falcons and 2 mysterious deities. One deity had a falcon's head, while the other wore a crown with a sun disk and cow horns. But the most baffling discovery was an inscription that read, "It is improper to boil a head in here." At the heart of the shrine, there are 15 headless falcons carefully arranged on a pedestal, likely as offerings to the falcon-headed deity. One theory suggests the birds were boiled first, perhaps to pluck their feathers, before being placed in the shrine, following the strange rule carved into stone. Archaeologists also found a 13-inch iron harpoon nearby. Its true purpose remains unknown, although the shrine also held remains of fish, mammals, and bird eggs, suggesting that the rituals may have included feasting. And speaking of ancient Egypt, meet Hathor. Scientists named her after the ancient Egyptian deity of motherhood, music, and singing. This wooden statue, housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was thought to be just a beautiful artifact, until a surprising secret was uncovered. Using an X-ray machine, experts found a mechanical operating system inside it, with pulleys and axles connecting her shoulder to her left leg. When activated, the system made her hand raise and lower, an engineering marvel from over 3,000 years ago. The statue was created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, and is often compared to 19th century automata due to its advanced design. It's believed the statue was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing Hathor's role in dance and music. An unexpected discovery happened in northern Kuwait, where a Kuwaiti-Polish team uncovered a mysterious 7,500-year-old statue. The statue features an elongated skull, no mouth, narrow eyes, and a flattened nose. This feature is thought to be an Ophidian figurine, named after the Greek word for snake, and it was likely made by the Ubaid culture, a civilization known for their pottery skills. While no one knows exactly what role this weird statue played, it might have been linked to rituals or symbolic practices. Some scientists think these figurines, found in homes or final resting places, were tied to important cultural beliefs. We couldn't mention unresolved mysteries of this world without speaking about these elongated skulls. In the deserts of Peru, researchers uncovered 5 ancient skeletons, 2 with unnaturally elongated skulls. While head shaping was common in many cultures, these skulls defy explanation. Local legends tell tales of the so-called gentiles, a mysterious race banished underground by the powerful deities. Some say this is what the skulls represent. Others think this is some type of genetic anomaly, which was confirmed after finding an infant skull, too large to be artificially shaped.
It's 1898, and you're taking part in excavations in Saqqara. This place, not far away from Cairo, is full of ancient tombs and pyramids. You're in your Indiana Jones mood and hope to find something really phenomenal to become famous. Gold, manuscripts, treasure maps, mummies of famous pharaohs. Wait, a wooden bird? You're really disappointed as it looks like a regular toy. An old one, but still. Little do you know that years later, someone would propose that your bird was actually an ancient monoplane. So the artifact, nicknamed the Saqqara bird, is made of a sycamore tree. The birdie has a wingspan of just 7 inches and weighs around 40 grams. A perfect original souvenir from Egypt, I would say. It's over 2,000 years old and looks pretty plain, without any carvings of feathers or other intricate ornaments. It has a beak and eyes though, which makes our find look like a hawk, the emblem of the deity Horus. Its tail is rather unusual as it's squared, looks weirdly upright, and it seems like the sunken part of it was the place for a now missing piece. Humans love solving a good mystery, so there have been several attempts to explain the use of the birdie. First, quite simply, is that it was a ceremonial object. The second idea is that it was a toy for a child from some well-off family. It could have been some sort of boomerang, which was a popular concept in ancient Egypt. Then there was a theory that the bird had been used as a weather vane. But this one has been debunked as the figure doesn't have any holes or markings, except for the one made at the museum in Cairo to fix the exhibit on a stick. So there was no way to hang it in the past. Almost a century after the bird was found, Egyptologist Dr. Khalil Masiha proposed a new theory that it could have been a model of a monoplane. He believed the bird was missing a horizontal tailplane. Otherwise, it had its wings set at a right angle, similar to that of modern planes. It could have worked to generate the aerodynamic lift necessary for flights. Dr. Masiha also claimed that it was common at that time to place miniature models of technological inventions in tombs. So, did the ancient Egyptians really invent the plane in 200 BCE? That would make the Wright brothers, who are considered the inventors of aviation, really upset. They made one of their first flights only in 1903. There's just one way to know for sure, and that is to test the model. But you know, the ancient museum in Cairo would unlikely let one of their cherished exhibits fly around like a toy. That's why glider designer Martin Gregory built a similar model, this time of balsa wood, and concluded that even with the missing tailplane, the plane wasn't much of a flyer. Case solved? Not really. This didn't sound convincing enough to the History Channel, so they invited an aerodynamics expert to build another replica of the bird. He tested it in weather conditions similar to those in Egypt and was impressed with the little plane's abilities. So, if they did invent the prototype of a plane back in the times of pharaohs, it would be a good example of an oupart. That's an out-of-place artifact, an object that's way ahead of its time in terms of technology or history. And the Saqqara bird isn't the only example of such a revolutionary concept. In 1901, a group of divers retrieved the Antikythera mechanism from an underwater shipwreck near the Greek island of Antikythera. It's been dubbed the world's first analog computer, and it's currently dated around 100 BCE. The bronze mechanism could tell the position of the sun, moon, planets, and stars, as well as the lunar phase, the dates of upcoming solar eclipses, and even the speed at which the moon moves through the sky. No one's sure who used it and how or where it was made, but it's obvious that it's extremely precise and way too advanced for its time. The first flushing toilets in the world were invented in the middle of the 20th century. Just kidding. The ancient Minoans on the Mediterranean island of Crete and the Indus Valley civilization both came up with this brilliant invention at the same time, around 4,000 years ago. The plumbing and sanitation were so well done that no one managed to design anything better until 2,000 years later. One ancient Minoan lavatory was discovered at the Palace of Knossos. It looks like it had a wooden seat set over a tunnel that directed water from a rooftop reservoir to an underground sewer. Other varieties got water from jugs. Only the super rich people could afford all this glory. So if you wanted to shop for real estate back then, the flushing toilet would be a telltale sign you were in the rich neighborhood. Automated doors became a cool, seemingly new invention back in 1931. But the technology behind them is actually much older. Think the 1st century CE old. Mathematician and engineer Heron of Alexandria came up with a hydraulic system to open and close temple doors. To bring it into action, you need to light a fire to produce heat. There was a brass pot under the fire, half filled with water. The inventor connected the brass pot to containers that acted as weights. When the fire was burning, the water moved into the containers. They went down and pulled the ropes. It was nothing like a supermarket door that opens in front of you before you even have time to think. Heron's door took hours to open, and there was no way to stop the process. That's why they only opened the doors once a day before people entered the temple, to add some mysticism at the temple during ceremonies. Spooky. Looks like the first ever battery was invented in Baghdad around 2,000 years ago. A German archaeologist found this oval-shaped clay jar in 1938. Scientists are still not sure what purpose it served and who exactly invented it. There is a theory that it was used for electroplating objects with precious metals. When they filled it with a weak acid like vinegar, the battery produced around 1 volt of electricity. Another theory says it was a vessel for sacred scrolls. Would you like to buy contact lenses designed by Leonardo da Vinci himself? In 1508, he invented a glass lens with a funnel on one side. You were supposed to wear it with water inside to improve your vision. Sounds a bit uncomfortable, doesn't it? So, around a century later, French scientist René Descartes decided to improve the idea and make the cornea contact the future lenses. Contacts because they contact your eyes, get it? The glass tube with liquid did help improve vision, but blinking was sadly impossible. 2.5 centuries later, new technologies in the glass industry let scientists design contacts that would fit in the eye and even let the wearer blink. Thanks, guys! Still, those lenses were made of heavy blown glass and didn't let the eye breathe. About 50 years later, contacts became plastic, lightweight, unbreakable, and scratch-resistant, but still covering the entire eye. And then, in 1948, an English optical technician accidentally sanded down a plastic lens and figured out they'd still be in place even if they covered only the cornea. Imagine you're living in 19th century London and need to send a message to New York. It would have taken about 10 days to get there by ship. So when delivery time went from days to hours in 1858, it was a true sensation. The first message was sent by Queen Victoria herself. It was all made possible thanks to the transatlantic telegraph cable, running under the ocean. Sadly, the new cool invention only lasted a few weeks. It took years to bring it back to life.